Hi, folks. Welcome to PMQs Day, Wednesday. We've got obviously PMQs to report on. We've got Nicola Sturgeon's daily COVID update. Stuart's got a couple of articles he wants to mention, Kevin McKenna, and what's his name from the Times?
He's the up and budding star. Mark McLaughlin, the new man at the London Times in Scotland.
Right, okay. England's man in Scotland for the Times, shall we say?
Murdoch's man, you could even say for shorthand.
Well, I'll kick off with PMQs. Starmer was very grown up. He led on the response. Is Boris prepared to admit he made mistakes effectively? Boris did his usual. He seems to, every single question Starmer asks, he asks why Starmer doesn't support him. And if he's not asking for support, he's asking Starmer to get off the fence. He doesn't seem to understand what opposition is.
But, I mean, he should be penalised by the presiding officer, the speaker, for asking questions of Starmer, because that's not what it's called. Prime Minister's questions.
He has been pulled in the past by the speaker, but he just seems to, this is Boris Johnson, he's just going to ignore every question. What I found very obvious today was the only questions he answered were from Tory MPs. They were placed questions to make the government look good. There wasn't a single other question that he actually had an answer for. It shouldn't be called Prime Minister's questions. It should be called Prime Minister's avoidance. The difference between it and what happens at Holyrood is really stark. I won't say that Nicola Sturgeon answers every question, because she doesn't, but she at least imparts information when she's questioned. She has the information in front of her and at her fingertips, and she delivers that. Now, it may, and she is guilty of choosing a tangent to keep her out of trouble. It's what politicians do. But at least she knows the subject she's talking about. All Boris does is bang on about, produce lists of what the Tory government's done, and then tell Stammers, you should be supporting us.
Oh, that annoys me.
You know,
why should the leader of the official opposition be supporting the government? That would make me very angry if they did.
Well, I mean, in this democracy, you know, it's adversarial. That's how you get to the problems, how you get to the truth, how you question policy. You know, I mean, we support that.
Oh,
that's great scrutiny.
Well, I can tell there's a tone of frustration in your voice there.
I
feel it myself.
Really getting annoyed with Boris.
As somebody
and
said
the speaker.
Well, it's not only, I mean, we've got Keir Starmer leading a Labour Party, which is simply another Tory party. It's just not quite so bloody blue.
Well, I mean, I think a couple of things that were said, the highest number of deaths in Europe, that was avoided. Boris' answer to that was, we were the first with a vaccine. Doesn't answer the question. I mean, practically, I've got my notes here, and I think just about every question that was asked doesn't answer the question, criticizes Labour's stance.
You missed out the one good question that there was a certain amount of, the one question that Keir Starmer asked that really got to Boris, come on, which was it? It was Cummings' question, Dominic Cummings and his pay rise.
That, and again, that was totally ignored.
It wasn't ignored. He got, Boris started, you got like this, he didn't know what to say.
Well, what he actually said was, why is Keir Starmer's trivializing the efforts of the British people? It was a question about Dominic Cummings getting a £40,000 pay rise.
Yeah. 520-mile trip to Barnard Castle. And everybody else, key workers are getting a pay freeze. Why did Cummings get a £40,000 rise? And at that point, I've written, Prime Minister stammers, and he did.
Yeah, but I mean, his answer was,
Eventual answer.
why do you trivialize the efforts of the British people? Your only solution is a lockdown. We will continue with the tier system, which had nothing whatsoever to do with the question asked. And the speaker sat there twiddling his thumbs.
Yeah, it's the speaker that really needs censured. Censured, sorry, not censored, censured. The man needs a kick up the butt.
Well, it was a total waste of time. There is no information imparted, no questions answered, nothing.
I'll expect what you will see is in the next couple of days, somebody will produce a video of the Prime Minister not answering the Dominic Cummings questions. And they'll be even, you know, you don't have to do much. You'll just have to stretch the stammers and put in something funnier.
You could, in reality, you could just move the answers to each question, one question down on a list. That's how close they were to answering. And it wouldn't look any different.
Well, what do you learn? What do you learn about
Nothing.
this government from this Prime Minister at Prime Minister's questions? And that is the point of the exercise.
Well, you could do away with it and we'd be no worse off.
Look, if people are questioning the quality of the democracy in Washington about, you know, this lack of decent handover by Trump, you know, it's a worry about the democracy. Look at the state of the democracy in this country.
Well, what struck me was they're going to start these press briefings out of Downing Street.
Haven't they already started?
Well, yeah, have they? They're not being
Oh, are these going to be televised, you mean? A bit like they used to be in the White House?
A bit like the American system.
Oh, right. I didn't realize they were going to be televised. I thought she'd already got started their job.
Well, it's a spin fest.
Allegra Stratton. What a name.
Yeah, she's a good reporter, actually. I like her.
Yeah, but imagine having a name like that. I mean, the worst car that they ever built in this country, an Austin Allegra. Imagine being stuck with a name like that.
I think Allegra was probably in the name book before they named the car after her. But the point I'm making is we're going to have press conferences daily that are just spin. We've got Boris, who basically ignores any question that isn't from a Conservative, and an opportunity to list the supposed achievements of this government. So you're going to get no information out of this government at all, which brings us on to Ian Blackford.
Oh, right. Okay. What did he do?
Well, he went into list mode as well. He basically suggested that Scotland is presumed to be going to lose $4 billion because of Brexit. So Boris's answer to that was about unemployment and how our youngsters were less unemployed than other people's youngsters. And the Scottish economy was suffering because of Scotland's high tax regime.
Calm down before your blood pressure explodes.
Well, and then of course we went on to hospitality needs support. This is from a Conservative MP, Sarah Dines.
She must be from London, is she?
No, she's north, some tourist area. But there was literally nothing came out of it. Total waste of time.
Well, I watched television news this week from the point of view of a northerner. And maybe I was biased, but my goodness, now that it's the hospitality trade in London that's been hit, whoa, all of a sudden it's a brand new headline on the television news as if it's a new thing.
Well, the other question that pertains to Scotland was from Ronnie Callan, SNP, and it was about drug deaths, and he specifically asks about drug consumption rooms. Boris's answer was effectively to say, nothing to do with me, Gov. You know, I'll look at it, but no, everything's the devolved government's fault.
Well, they keep telling us that they can't change the law because it's a UK law, and that's why they can't have drug consumption rooms in Glasgow. Who's going to be right? Who do you believe?
According to the Prime Minister, the majority of the powers needed are already vested in the devolved administrations. So the failure is down to them. So the fact that they cannot introduce drug consumption rooms, which is one of, I think, 3 suggestions, all of which are in the gift of the Westminster government because they control the drug laws. So the position, I think, politically of the Conservatives says, we're going to do nothing because the Scottish government are getting beaten up every year over these numbers.
Yeah, I think I don't think it's black and white. That's the trouble. I'm going to ask an expert. We both know an expert in the field, so I'm going to ask him, see if he might even do it on camera. So,
well, I mean, there'll be a health issue. I mean, the beds for rehab, etc.
They've not, the funding for them has dropped badly, but then again, it's hugely expensive. You know, it's full. It's like more than a hotel. You've got a hotel plus a hotel accommodation for what, 6 weeks minimum or something, and then you've got the psychiatrists and the psychologists.
Well, I mean, my point about it is that there's a health route, but part of the health route is getting to the people who are taking the drugs. And one of the great things about the drug consumption rooms is they're there, and the support can go in and try and persuade people to take advantage of full-time support. Otherwise, they're up back alleys. You know, it's not an easy thing to persuade them.
Every time that this issue comes up, 1968, I was briefly on the streets in Bournemouth in south of England. I was sleeping rough, and then I was sleeping in my car and things. Anyway, that summer, the local hospital started a new policy of handing out heroin to anybody that could turn up and prove they were a junkie. That was 1968. To save lives.
Yeah.
I can't. What else can I say?
Well, I just think it's too good a stick to beat the Scottish government with for the Tories to do anything to assist. I'm sorry, that's where I am on this one. I can't understand why, when other countries have instigated drug consumption rooms and they've been proven to be useful, they might not be the panacea, but they've helped. Portugal, Holland, why the Tories just will not do it. We're not asking them to do it in England. We're not asking them to do it in Wales or Northern Ireland, just Scotland.
Well, your analysis makes sense. It's a big stick they can keep using to hit Scotland with.
Well, that's bad. It's the only reason I can see for them refusing to take a route that has proven in other countries to be useful.
It allows them to debase all us Scots and call us junkies, alcoholics, and violent.
Well, and there's another argument about, is there a route through health to institute what is effectively a drug consumption room? You know, I mean, can the Scottish government not find a way to bypass what I'm going to call English law?
I honestly don't know the answer. It makes me angry, and maybe, well, I'll say I'm going to ask somebody I know, see if they'll leave it. I'll certainly ask him some questions about it. I do remember vividly looking at a documentary that was shown recently all about the AIDS and drugs crisis in Edinburgh, in particular Leith, back in the 80s. And they interviewed some retired police officers that had been working on the cases back then. Now, back then, there was a needle exchange set up in the old Leith Hospital. And the police officers interviewed said they were sent down there to stand outside the Leith Hospital and bust the junkies coming out of the Leith Hospital with the clean needles.
That was the attitude, though, wasn't it?
And they were embarrassed about it in the documentary, 30 years later.
But that was the attitude then.
I don't think it's changed.
Well, it doesn't seem to have changed at Westminster. I mean, we both know people that have been through rehab for drugs and alcohol.
Of course.
And, we know they didn't do it once. Most of them had 3 or 4 goes at it. And for some of them, it never worked. So
is it just a moral? Is it a moral thing? Is it? It seems to be
political.
I'm going to be controversial here. It seems to be Christians, people with these supercilious, strange moral positions.
Well, I can't agree with that. I'm sorry. A lot of Christian organizations are involved in trying to help drug addicts in one way or another. It's the black or white thing. It's been able to stand on the hustings before an election and say, we'll get these junkies off the streets by locking them up in jail.
Tough on crime, tough on the causes of crime.
Well, nobody ever stands up and says, we'll get these junkies off the streets by giving them a decent life and support.
It's too complicated. Not with the sun sticking in the mail.
Yeah.
Spreading junkie lies.
But I mean, to me, the way to solve the dilemma is to say, right, okay, we're going to give Scotland the control over this in order to see if it works. Let's use Scotland as an experiment. They were happy enough to do it with a poll tax. Why not do it with drug consumption rooms?
I think we've done enough of this. I'm going to explode otherwise.
Yeah, okay. You watched, well, I've watched the start of Nicola Sturgeon's COVID briefing.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think?
Very comprehensive, is a good word. Very topical. She'd left a UK Four Nations discussion in the room upstairs to come down and speak to the press. It was ongoing, she said. So some of the questions she wasn't able to answer. What did we discover? Well, first of all, poor Jimmy, the grounds for he's got more than one kind of grounds for his complaint about the Edinburgh position on level 3, hasn't he? But the one about prevalence, today, the Lothians has the highest new cases of infection of COVID. 140, Lothian, Glasgow 109, Lanarkshire 97. So I'll just stick that one in. They had a problem with the Scottish app that reports when you've been close to somebody. That was a bit unfortunate. The First Minister apologised for that. Normally it would have, over a period of a day and a half, that app would normally report about 250 people, typically, that have been possibly close to somebody who was infected. It reported 900, and they decided that was a problem with the computer rather than the persons.
Had to do with it being too sensitive.
Yeah.
I'm very glad that it was 4 times more sensitive rather than 4 times less sensitive.
There you go. Good point. It came up 2 or 3 times. I'm very glad that the Deputy Chief Medical Officer was there. The lovely Irish Nicola Steedman.
That was some speech she gave, wasn't it? It was like a TED talk.
She knows her stuff. Yeah, she gave a report on the vaccination progress and obviously she'll make a good politician actually, because she was very happy to tell us about 1.6 million people dead from this virus already in the world, but we were first to put out the COVID-19 vaccination. She even quoted Martin Luther King. I mean, how political was that?
There's a big thing about getting supplies for this. That's going to become an issue down the road.
Well, maybe not.
Well, it is, because it's a four nations agreement. So the people responsible will be the Westminster government. And I've noticed that there has been very little criticism directly of the Westminster government. This is actually leverage, both for Scotland if it goes wrong through the Westminster government supply chain, but also for Westminster if Scotland don't toe the line in the direction they want.
This is the vaccination program you're talking about?
Yeah, the supplies are
coming.
Well,
did you get that really clarity towards the end, just about 1:25 from the Deputy Chief Medical Officer? She was explaining that because she was asked what sounded like an awkward question. How come we were first in Scotland to get it into care homes, but they were first to get it into GP surgeries in England? The Deputy Chief Medical Officer, she really explained it quite simply. Said, we have completely different structures. We have health boards in Scotland, and they are a legal entity. In England, they have something health partnerships, and they're I think they're private organizations, you see. So she didn't and she went into the detail after that. Don't expect me to explain that. I'm not clinical.
Well, the other thing is this packing down.
That was part of it, and that's these health partnerships in England are huge compared to our health boards.
Yeah.
And so they could accept these huge, 1,000 or whatever it is, nearly 1,000 injections in a pizza box, and didn't handle them. Whereas in Scotland, and don't forget, we discovered that you had to you didn't just have to be a registered nurse in Scotland to give this injection. You had to be employed by the NHS in Scotland to be legally allowed to do so by the insurance.
Yeah, I was about to say that'll be an insurance issue.
Yeah. So these are issues that, however, they did say that the number 1 and number 2 priority groups were still the same in both countries. The care home residents and staff, and then what I would call key workers, in other words, NHS front-facing staff and 80-year-olds.
Well, my wife is getting it.
Yeah.
On the 24th of December.
All right.
Because she works with prem babies and she's into people's houses and stuff. So she's kind of well down the list within that group. But so they must be confident they're getting more supplies.
There is another report, this is another controversial thing. We've had one of these before. This is one of these reports that Public Health Scotland produces about schools. This is an ongoing row. It's always political. The government are always getting attacked by the EIS and the school teachers. Now, how is it full of unionists? Or is that what the problem is?
No, teachers? It's the teachers' unions are really quite lefty. They're a bastion of socialism.
Militant, you mean? Good old-fashioned militant.
Yeah, they are.
Up against the wall.
And they will take every opportunity. And quite right too. That's their job as a union.
Well, we had a second report, because I remember the First Minister talking about a report a couple of weeks ago. But we had another report, which I'm not going to go into the detail of because it's over my head, to be honest. But it was another case of we're doing all right in schools. Things aren't worse in schools at all.
Than everywhere else. Yeah, and I mean,
the same.
it's that doesn't surprise me in the least if you consider what they've put in place in schools. I'm not in the least bit surprised. And teachers are very good at obeying rules, because they must be, because they're very good at making other people obey rules. Here's Jimmy joining us.
Oh, very good. So the First Minister wasn't ducking it. She didn't duck it, and she says, my view, which is fair enough. Look, this is my view. Schools, it's right that they're staying open. And she simply backed it up. Apparently, they've had a community pilot on the asymptomatic testing. Was that Johnston? Hi there, Jimmy. I think that was Johnston. Anyway, they tested 15,000 people. Out of those 15,000 people, these were all asymptomatic people. Nobody that was expected to be positive, and only 228 turned out to be infected out of 15,000. So, but I don't know.
And we're on the presser. Did you catch it, Jimmy?
I caught part of it, mate.
As usual, of course, I say as usual, that's not quite the right term, but the other big issue, of course, was Christmas and the restrictions and whether they should be changed. And I could go on and on and on about them. But you've joined us, Jimmy. You must have seen a bit of some of the questions about Christmas. Which one did you like or not like?
I didn't, mate. I thought the whole thing was a bit of pantomime today.
It was a bit. Dressed up, pantomime dames.
Well, no, I'm assuming they knew that Nicola was going to come across as hectoring and lecturing. Hence the reason they got the vampy doctor to come in and overact
she was good
completely.
Yeah, no, she was good. She gave her speech. She even quoted Martin Luther King. I thought she's got a future as a politician.
She's certainly got a future in amateur dramatics, mate. The way she was sighing and rolling her eyes and everything.
That's why she gets to me. I thought it was because she was Irish.
I did think it was a bit of a speech rather than a question, answer, or statement.
Well, she knew her stuff, though.
My favourite question today was from our man in Scotland at the Times, where he said, what was the question? Would you consider yourself rash if there is a spike after Christmas because of decisions you made at Christmas? So not only do we want you to have a crystal ball, we want you to juggle it while standing on one foot, balanced on the parapet of a high building.
And blame yourself on a premise that might not happen, but I want you to blame yourself anyway, so please blame yourself.
Well, blame yourself in case you don't have to blame yourself later.
And then she was sharp there. She says, I quoted a report. It wasn't me. I felt like shouting at her.
I thought the interesting one was that Boris, when under pressure from Starmer, indicated that agreement had been reached between the four nations when clearly agreement hasn't been reached yet. So basically, England's going to do what it wants, and the rest of us have just to kind of tag along.
Well, I think Wales is the problem. I think the Welsh really want to shut down the border. And to be honest, if I was English, I would want Wales to shut down the border.
Yeah, because the numbers in certain parts of Wales are horrific at the moment, aren't they?
About 1,000.
And it's going to be interesting when they finally dig into it to discover what caused that, because Wales tried hard with the lockdown.
Yeah, well, they had their fire break, and then their tiers were quite harsh. Some of them, weren't they?
Yeah,
and the numbers have still exploded in certain parts of Wales.
So I look forward down the line to finding out what they attribute that to. But I would imagine Drakeford's having sleepless nights at the moment, having tried just about everything he could.
Yeah, they've kind of they're kind of between a rock and a hard place at the moment.
Yeah,
and particularly given that the western part of England, the numbers are really rather low. So the part of England that borders onto Wales, like you say, if I was in one of those English counties, I'd want the Wales to shut the border.
Yeah. It'd be interesting to see how that works the other way around, because
it's very porous. Bristol across to Newport, you know, they're the same commuting. It's like going from Fife into Edinburgh, Wales into Bristol.
Well, that
shouldn't every day, you know.
Fife in Edinburgh shouldn't be allowed even when there isn't a pandemic.
It shouldn't have been allowed this morning. Did you see that nonsense on the bridge?
No.
Oh, they had there was some debris on the southbound. One of the lanes southbound was closed because of debris. And they were trying to recover it, obviously. And people were ignoring the lane closure because they didn't want to sit in traffic and bombing up a closed lane. And apparently one of the guys who was trying to get debris very nearly got hit. Now, forgive me for being anti-Fifer, but that bridge is brand new. The cameras on it must be digital. I reckon these people should be getting 80 quid fines dropping through their letterbox next week for their Christmas present.
Why
Anybody
would you
that went
go
up a closed
blocked lane?
Because they didn't want to sit in traffic, mate. They're desperate to get into Edinburgh.
Did they weave through the cones or something?
It wasn't blocked with cones, mate. It was just blocked by signage, i.e. a big red X that means you do not use that lane. But people chose to ignore it because they desperately needed to get wherever they were going.
That's a different legal classification of motorway, that stretch from Halbeath nearly all the way down across the bridge. It's you have to behave yourself. You don't break through those red crosses.
Yeah, well, as I say, Stuart, I'm hoping that if people are going to be getting nice big fat fines dropping on their doormats for their Christmas.
If they won't obey the signs, the lighty up signs, the big ones, that means they'll have to start putting cones out.
Exactly. We go back to the 20th century.
Well, Stuart, that's the point I'm making. If they start putting cones out, that means every problem they have, the time gets quadrupled.
Oh, well, they don't work with cones. Those you have to obey those red crosses. You down in England, they had them for 10 years before they first put them in Scotland. If you have to obey those red crosses. I broke down on a 4-lane stretch of the M6 at Christmas a couple of years ago in the wrong lane. I shit myself. I really did, because there's no hard shoulder.
I came through Birmingham where they used the hard shoulder as a lane.
That's what I mean.
During rush hour.
Yeah.
And I have to say it was very, very scary.
It is scary.
Aye. So the way that some people behave on roads is a sight to behold.
How would you know, Jimmy? You're a taxi driver.
I see everything, mate. See everything. I might, of course, I obey all the laws because I'm a professional.
Naturally, of course you do. Of course you do.
Actually, just to give you a giggle, mate, there was talking of professional drivers, there was a drive-along protest of Edinburgh black cabs at Parliament this morning.
Protesting about what?
They're wanting more money, mate, but it was organised by Unite the Union, Unite Black Cab branch, and it was the Edinburgh Brethren in support of all their brethren throughout the land who want more cash.
All right, so not happy with the cash they're getting and really upset because London cabbies are getting out.
Aye, and running round in circles at Holyrood Park, hooting their horns in absolute breaking the law by using their horn in a non-emergency situation, and also breaking the terms of their licence by using their cabs for political protest. But there we go. That's Unite for you. Chuck their members under a bus so they can get a nice photo up.
Now, I'm going to presume that as soon as you saw the cabs down there, you got up to Waverley and onto the rank as quick as possible.
I was sitting on a rank, mate. I didn't ken anything about it till it popped up on my phone and I had a wee giggle at it.
Okay.
You ken me, I've got as much as I'm a Labour man, mate, I have very, very little time for trade unions these days because it's a career path for politicians and it's a career path for mouthpieces rather than doing anything seriously decent for their members. I think the last time the trade unions were effective was the 80s, really.
Now, I'm going to bow out of that argument because I still have a great deal of respect for my old union. Fire Brigade.
Your old union's one of the few that's still useful, mate.
Right on, brother.
I was quite, I joined the CWU. That was the last union I was in, Communication Workers Union. But I must admit, it was because I was a member of the club and I played for the pool team and cheap beer.
I joined because I thought the CWU was one of the last trade unions left that could really be effective. But
They were effective in those days.
well, nah, they weren't, mate, because they had the option to go and call an all-out strike, which would have absolutely hamstrung the Royal Mail when I was there, and they chose to have 1 day and 2 day stoppages instead, which absolutely suited the management perfectly.
I take your word for it. You know, I never got involved.
Kevin McKenna's piece, Stuart.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking that this is very appropriate, seeing as just what Jimmy's just said. Did you get a chance to see the Kevin McKenna piece, Jimmy?
I haven't, mate, no.
Well, it's basically what he's saying is, 7 years ago, I switched to become indie. I'm still a socialist. I'm not happy with the drift of the SNP to neoliberalism, but I will still vote for independence because that's still the best hope for my socialist principles. What do you think?
Well, who's he going to vote for anyway? Can he vote for Starmer?
Oh, well, he kind of references that, the Corbyn era. You know, there was don't forget when Corbyn was getting, you know, he was getting lauded at Glastonbury. There were loads of people in Scotland must have changed their minds about the SNP then, surely.
I don't think so.
I
think Labour's lost Scotland. That
2017 election that Corbyn really could have won if the Labour Party had swung in behind him completely at that point. They still didn't do that well in Scotland. I mean, the SNP didn't do great, but it was actually an election that the Tories done well in, wasn't it?
Who was leading the Labour Party at that point? Because I can't remember. Was that the John Murphy?
No, was it not?
Kezia?
I think it was Kez, aye.
All right.
And she'd proved to be particularly unimpressive as a leader, so they really weren't going to get a jump in Scotland. It was kind of seen as SNP versus the Union, and the Unionist vote on quite a bit of the Labour vote went Tory that time.
Well, Kevin, sorry, Norrie.
Well, I was going to say the McKenna piece, which I haven't read, so I might be talking out of my backside here. But my view of the SNP was always that they were such a wide base. I mean, they had Tories and they had socialists in the party, and I always thought it allowed them to make good decisions as a party based on what was best for the people, both from the capitalist point of view and the socialist point of view. I'm not entirely sure that I was right about that, especially with the woke stuff, the GRA stuff. I still do feel that they have an advantage in that their dogma is about independence. It's not about the market or nationalizing everything that moves. You know, they can afford to be both nationalizers, which they've done with Prestwick and to a certain extent with BIFAB, and capitalists, which they've done in other ways by supporting big business. So it kind of gives them the opportunity to make the best decision. Are they making the best decisions is the question for me.
Well, Kevin McKenna, it's worth reading the article. It's not complicated.
I'll have a look at it. I didn't agree with their drift towards neoliberalism, but I certainly, you guys know I came to the SNP through the independence campaign. But next year, I'll no need a noddy suit and a couple of pegs, but I'll certainly need to hold my nose when I put my cross in the SNP box, because there's a few things going on internally and via policy that I really don't agree with.
Yeah, he doesn't miss. He ticks those boxes. It's worthwhile reading because he has a go at the GRA issue. He has a go at the people sitting like Pete Wishart sitting there taking big salaries in Westminster. You know.
See, I didn't have no time. I have no time for Pete Wishart, but at the same time, folk having a pop at him for taking his salary. What do you want him to do? Do you want him to do the job and hand his salary to charity? End of the day, he's a bloke like anybody else. He's doing a job, he gets paid for it.
He does have a big chunk of his salary to charity, as do they all.
Do they? All right. Well, let me, Kevin gives there's a nice quote here, though. Yet, I have to conclude that independence is indeed everything, not least because gaining it would land a massive blow on an increasingly corrupt and elitist British state. How's
Yeah, I
that?
think some of the stuff we've seen this year has been breathtaking, and around the contracts, for example, and the fact that ministers could fast track contracts or fast track their friends into positions where they had advantages to gain those contracts. That astonishes me. The fact that Westminster thinks that that's okay.
The fact it's not all over the front page of every single newspaper in the land doesn't astonish me that they do it. They've been doing it for years underhand. The fact that they're getting brass naked about it, yeah.
That's my
the fact it's been ignored by the press.
No, that's my definition of a gangster, because they're now open about it. That's a gangster. They get away with it because they know they can.
That's the stunning thing. We're so far away from, falling on your sword. What would you have to do to resign now?
Well, remember that quote, the Trump quote, I could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and they would still vote for me.
Well, I mean, I can't think.
I think Priti Patel could throttle a Palestinian in front of the cenotaph and do it whilst wearing jackboots and singing the Horst Wessel, and Boris Johnson would still not ask for a resignation. That's how far it's gone.
That's a very good quote, Jimmy. I might have to use that today.
I find it stunning. And I have to admit, with Dominic Cummings going, because he picked on the Prime Minister's girlfriend, it would appear that the only resignation would be if he tried to get into her knickers.
Maybe he did.
Well, I'm talking about, it seems to be a personal slight to Boris Johnson is more important than corruption and bullying and.
I wonder where Boris is spending Christmas. I can think of quite a few personal slights I'd like to inflict upon him.
I think he might be in a tent somewhere in Wales this time. He's had maybe a caravan, seen as it's winter.
I had visions of him in a tent in the Saudi Arabian desert with a harem.
Or he might be at a party in Italy. He likes to party in Italy.
Party in Italy.
Jimmy, you were late to us. Anything in particular?
Not really, mate. As I say, I think I watched about 25 minutes of the PMQs today, and basically that's where Starmer needs to be. I think he had Boris absolutely bricking it. He had a bank of rights, and Boris really was struggling to answer the simplest of questions. Like, he's not going to admit that he done anything wrong. And that's where Starmer needs to just stay. Keep banging on that our economy has been hammered much worse than anybody else in the G7 because of the dithering and the lack of lockdown at the start, and that the death toll in the United Kingdom is much worse than other major developed countries. Because at that point, there's no answer for Boris. He can't deny these facts, and he can't admit his culpability in these facts. By the way, Ian Blackford was pretty good the day and all. I was quite impressed with the bold Ian for once.
I must admit, the steam was coming out of my ears. You actually missed it. But what stood out to me was the fact that Boris didn't answer a single question unless it came from a Conservative MP and it was a list of the achievements of the Conservative Party.
Oh, they were laughable the day, mate. I'm assuming that they supplied knee pads to the Tory MPs that got questions today, because every single one of them got down and blew some smoke up Boris's whatever.
And it was a complete sham.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really, I have to be honest, I was so annoyed with Johnson that I didn't really think about what a good job Stammers had done, because he did hit everything on the nail, every nail on the head.
I'll tell you what, they could start with Michael Fabricant every week for me, because he just was laughably inept. I mean, come on. Surely somebody needs to get a hold of that man and take him to a decent syrup shop and get him a decent syrup, because that is laughable what he wears on his head.
Did you you didn't see Newsnight last night?
I didn't know I had
Right.
decided to push out some Zeds back then.
You know the Tory MP that wears the button collar. You can always see there's a bit sticks out underneath. It's a collar that buttons onto his shirt, and he's an eccentric guy. He obviously gets his suits made in Savile Row. They're always very well cut. But he was on a Zoom call, and his curtains were basically the portcullis from the House of Commons.
Very nice.
I mean, he's an eccentric kind of guy. He's a libertarian, talking about how everybody should be free to do what they want. But him and Fabricant would make a wonderful couple of comedians for the Queen to go and see at the Palladium.
I mean, Spit and Image would be wasting their time doing a Michael Fabricant puppet, because the actual Michael Fabricant would be far more ludicrously turned out than any puppet that they came up with.
Stuart, anything to finish with? That's 25 past the hour.
I don't think so, other than recommend everybody to go and see the Mike McLaughlin article, the hack, the Times, London Times hack. Not only did he prove to be the most annoying journalist at today's presser, he did actually report on forget about it.
Oh dear, Stuart's lost.
No, I just can't be bothered with it. It's a stupid story.
All right.
Thanks for watching, everybody, in spite of me being stupid.
Okay, we'll call it a day at that then. Cheers, Jimmy, for getting here.
No worries, mate.
And Stuart for joining us as always, and myself, Norrie Stewart. And we'll see you all tomorrow, which is First Minister's Questions. Last one of the year.
Yes, I wonder what Ruthie will go on tomorrow.
Yes, drugs. Did I hear drugs? Did I hear mumbling about drugs? Okay, folks, thanks for watching and listening. Cheerio for now.